Hello, my name is Jim Luken. I'm with the Gupta College of Science at Coastal Carolina University. And today I'm going to be talking with Dr. Stephanie Southworth. She is in the Department of Sociology at Coastal Carolina University, where she's a lecturer. And she's been involved in some really important work with the homeless here in the Myrtle Beach area. And we're going to get her today to talk a little bit about the homeless population. Stephanie, how are you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
Great. So this is kind of an area I suspect that most people don't just do normally. I mean, this is something that you had to have jumped into at some particular point in your history. So when did you first become involved with the homeless population here in Myrtle Beach?
I took a couple of years ago, I took some students on a field trip to a homeless camp, and the students were really excited about it, and they wanted to do more. And I felt like we could do more, me and along with my students. So I started teaching sociology of poverty. I had students go out and volunteer in a homeless shelter and conduct interviews. What we thought we were going to find is that, we could do some kind of collection and collect socks or food or something like that. And when these interviews started coming back in, we realized that it wasn't socks or food that people that were homeless needed. There were things that were much more important and vital to survival. And so, what started out as just a class project ended up being something that's gone on now for 5 years. We've now conducted over 250 interviews.
So the homeless population, I assume, is, at least for me, is kind of something that's we know it exists, but it's kind of invisible. We don't know the characteristics of it. We don't know how many. So how would you describe the homeless situation here in the Myrtle Beach community?
Well, most people, when they think about the homeless, they think about the person standing on the side of the road begging for change, yep, right?
Absolutely.
That's not most of the homeless. Most of the homeless are either working or trying to work, or they have some kind of disability where they can work. A lot of people come to Myrtle Beach and kind of get stranded. They might come to visit family or come to get a job, but then at the end of the season, the job's gone and they're left with no money and no place to go. I would describe the homeless population as just as diverse as the larger population. They have problems of mental illness and drug addiction, but you see that in regular people that aren't homeless. You see that drug addiction and mental illness there too. It's just less visible when you can go into your house and deal with that kind of stuff. So I would describe the population as very diverse.
Sure. And in terms of trying to get a handle on helping in this situation, I mean, what have you determined are the greatest needs of this population?
So number one is mental health care.
Really?
It's almost impossible for somebody with a job and with insurance to find decent, affordable mental health care. I know for personal experience, I've had, my children have wanted to go to a counselor and it's been problematic and very unaffordable. And I'm a college professor. There just are very few resources for them. Transportation is a huge issue. We had time after time, people said, I walked to this job interview, but by the time I got there, I was hot and sweaty and nobody wanted to hire me. So transportation was really big, and just the lack of affordable housing. Over 50% of the people we interviewed had jobs, and probably 30% had full-time jobs. But they could not afford, $1,400 a month for rent, or even $1,000 a month for rent. So those three things, along with not being paid a livable wage. So affordable housing, or housing they could afford, mental health care, and transportation were the three things that kind of were seen time and time again.
And I know you've you've involved a lot of your students in this work, and I assume students may be even, more surprised or maybe not so well informed about the homeless. How do you get college students involved in such a social issue like this?
Well, the classes I teach are Q courses, and so they're required to do something outside of class. So I give them a list of agencies that they can go and volunteer at. They have to volunteer for a certain number of hours per semester. And then each one of the students has an interview. They have to conduct one interview over the course of the semester. So these are part of the course requirements. If they don't want to do this, they can take a different course. These aren't classes that they have to take in order to graduate. But I'd say 99% of students love it once they do it. They really get a lot out of it.
So, and I know you wrote a little article for the Progression magazine. You had some comments from the students. It was clear their eyes had really been opened to something that they had no idea of, at least from me reading those comments. It was really pretty amazing.
Yeah, definitely. They are amazed when they hear people say, I want to get a job, but I just had a heart attack last month, or, they're like, I want to get back to work, but I've got all these physical problems, or I can't walk 5 miles to my job. My car broke down. When they find that the problems of the homeless are very similar to the problems of college students, they're very surprised.
Oh, yeah, I never thought about that. So I know I'm a little bit familiar with the Rolling Forward program. And so that was, I assume that was an outgrowth of your needs assessment where you determined that transportation was a big issue. So, so this is a program to get bicycles in the hands of people who are having transportation problems. So can you tell me a little bit about how that was started and how you got that thing going?
Well, we received a couple of grants from the university. We also, the first year we started Rolling Forward, the Department of Public Safety gave us the bikes that students had left, and we worked with the homeless shelter, the men's homeless shelter. The shelter was very willing to work with us on that because they realized that their residents were having problems with that as well. They have since taken that and started a bike program at their women's shelter. And we also have a bike program at the Transitional Housing Center for Veterans. So it's been very well received. We are conducting, before COVID, we've been conducting follow-up interviews to see, how it's helped people. And the response has been wonderful. We've helped over 300 people, get jobs, get houses, see their family, go to church, all the things that, people with transportation take for granted.
Sure. Such a simple and cheap thing, it's really amazing to think that, such a simple and cheap thing could have such a big impact on people's lives, until you realize if they don't have any other mode, getting around this area, everything's so spread out, it's not like there's anything really close together here.
Well, one of the reasons we decided to do this in Myrtle Beach is because a lot of the places where these folks work are right there in the tourist areas. So as long as they stay like down by the beach, then bikes work really well to get them where they need to go. If they were to get a job in Conway, that would be more problematic.
Sure, absolutely. So if we look beyond COVID, and let's hope we can be beyond COVID at some point in time, and I assume COVID has also been a unique challenge among the homeless population that just added another problem on an already existing problem. If we look beyond this, in this community, I mean, what's the future look like? Do you think we will make homelessness go away? Will it get worse? I mean, what can be done to address this problem?
Well, in the late 1970s, early 1980s, homelessness across the country had shrunk to such a small size that people actually thought that it would be eliminated. But we had a lot of social supports and social safety nets in place. Over the last 40, 50 years, those social safety nets have eroded. So a lot of these problems are structural. People in the military, and when they get out, they don't have the access to, mental health care. Physical health care is expensive. So a lot of the issues with homelessness have to do with things that, one community at a time, it's going to be very difficult to deal with until those social safety nets are in place. It's going to be something that isn't going to change all that much.
Sure. And I assume as the economy, either booms or busts, that's one of the things that I'm sure has some effect here. I guess some people always think that in a situation for a problem like this, the best solution is to grow the economy. Is that enough, do you think, or do there need to be other things that get put in place?
Growing the economy has to go hand in hand with an investment in low-income housing or affordable housing, wages that pay a living wage. Sure. Things that are in place that if somebody falls, they're not going to end up on the street. There used to be these kind of like halfway houses they would have for people that, had lost their housing and they could go to until they kind of were able to get back on their feet. All those things are no longer in place. So the economy is great. If the economy is good and people have jobs, it's wonderful. But if those jobs don't pay enough for housing, you're not going to fix the problem. It's just a Band-Aid.
Sure. And one final thing, this has to do with our students. And I always try to understand myself, how is the next group of students who comes in? What are going to be their interests and their concerns? I mean, do you see any trends in college students in terms of their concern about issues like this? Is it more concern? Is it less concerned? Is it about the same? What do you think?
I don't know that a lot of college students, unless they've experienced it, think much about poverty or homelessness. But I do know from taking these classes, they learned so much that they want to do more when they graduate. A lot of students have been, they've volunteered in a homeless shelter or a soup kitchen or somewhere like that. Once they graduate or once they leave the class, they're back in there volunteering. So this can not only give them real world experience, but job experience, references, those social ties. These courses have been really good for that. And that's not just anecdotally, but numerous students have come back and said, this class has changed my life.
Sure.
It's been very successful.
Sure. Well, okay. Well, thank you very much for taking the time to talk about this really important issue. I know I'm probably like everybody else. I see homeless people. I wonder about what the situation is, and I think you've given us a little bit of an insight into just who that population is and maybe how we can help them. So thank you very much for taking your time.
You're welcome.
Okay. Thank you very much.